Welcome to Tom Hands On. I left you guys off on part 1 with this flatbed dump box build. We began at the pivot with all the machine components, a little bit of fabrication. Today we're really going to get into the fab. We're going to actually start to build the bed. We're still missing a few parts like the scissor dump mechanism, and I got to build a receiver onto this plate, and I also have to mount some airbags, so there's quite a bit of work before I can get into actually building the bed, but it's all integrated into each other. So let's get to work. Let's get this show on the road. So I had to reinstall the tank so I knew what my clearances were on this rear plate once actually fabricated. Everything landed where I wanted it as far as clearances. I wish I had a little bit more room down under here so I could recess that receiver hitch plate in, but I'll be able to half overlap it. It'll kind of give you a little bit of a step to stand on too if I leave, you know, a couple inches or inch and a half. Easier to put a step on it. The other truck doesn't have that. I've slipped off the back of it a couple times, and it really sucks. There's nowhere to, you know, get up into the bed other than the hitch itself. So that's what we're doing. I can take the tank back out now and get this piece of receiver tube cut to cross over. Looks pretty good. I don't even have to delete any of these bolts. The angle pivot plates actually clear them all. I was fortunate. I didn't plan that. So all that fussing around with the fuel tank and stuff was to see if my receiver hitch was going to clear, and to see if I could drop the tank with the hitch welded in. So I can't use this 2.5 inch chunk as my crossover, so I'm gonna have to move to a piece of 3 inch to get the hitch low enough, because there's a little bit of angle on the tank. That hitch wants to hit right here. You can kind of see where it scraped it up. I'm gonna like round that over, and I'm gonna leave it out a little bit. I've got a little ding on there. The front side scratch right here because there's like a old weld or something I need to clearance, but it's gonna be tight, but I'll be able to get it in and out of there. So I'm gonna clean this up because it's hanging down 1/4 inch, and I'll be able to kind of, you know, tip the tank in. So I'm gonna get some steel because I don't have any 3 inch, and catch back up with you in a little bit. Well, I'm back from running around getting material and everything. It's taking a lot of work because that fuel tank doesn't have a lot of clearance. So I have to really be careful where I weld things in hard, or I won't be able to put the fuel tank back in, and it needs to be removable. So kind of a lot of planning and pondering and looking at things, not getting a whole lot done. And sometimes you got to take things apart, put them together a few times so you know where your clearances lie. But now I'm going to finish up one job from the last video that I wasn't sure if I was going to need to do or not. So I'm over here on the mill. The other truck has been recessed about 1/2 inch along this edge. So I'm going to do at least 1/2 to 5/8, probably 5/8 of an inch, and mill this back. That's what's going to set my bed position, the cab reveal of the bed position. So I don't want like a big gap between the front of the bed and the cab. And this particular line right here is what dictates that. Since this is really the only place the bed attaches other than just sitting down with the weight. So I'm gonna go ahead and mill that, and then we'll move on to the receiver hitch and the airbag mounts after this. So I'm gonna bust this out real quick so it's just done, and we'll be way ahead. like to use the vacuum. Saves a lot of cleanup and saves a lot of burning your hands and stuff trying to, you know, it's just slings chips everywhere when you mill on the edge like that. So here's a couple spots right next to the end mill. There's a little bit of a radius. I want to chew some of that material off before I grind it. And out here on the end, there's a radius on the back plate of the flatbed, an inner radius that I need to make clearance for. So I'm gonna chunk those two out and I'll rip this off and finish it with the grinder. Slightly left you hanging there. Battery died and Dad and everybody came in, so I had to visit with everybody for a little bit and go over some plans, like these big hooks are going to get installed under here, about like that. What you missed, and this is only tacked up, don't worry, you're not going to miss the welding. I tacked this guy on after sawing it to length, which you've had plenty of time with me in the saw, so you didn't miss much. I think I lost the battery when I was kind of working on those, tacked those up, and then tacked the lower piece on. It's not going to stay on, I'm just going to use it to make some inner gussets that go from here to here and match this angle so that I can put a plate on there and put those hooks on it. I need to be able to get to the back side of that guy. I might just drill and tap the plate with 5/8 bolts, because that hook is just got through holes. So maybe a piece of 1/2 inch or so plate. Now I need to refit the tank to make sure I got clearance here. We got this little step on the inside, but this is how it's looking so far. The receiver on the dump pivot dump frame, and then obviously these guys. Now I have a third place to weld it. Go on like this. I'll be able to weld to the top, the bottom, and this front side. They still poke out, you know, they look good. So I actually have more weld surface area than I used to, so that'll be even better. But I'm done for the day, so I'll catch up tomorrow when I get back to it. Well, I left you guys off yesterday with this section of the receiver hitch, how it looked. Today I'm going to start with building these airbag mounts. I've got some stock. I'm going to cut the length, but first I'm going to set up the mill so it's ready to accept that to drill holes. So get a little indicator action in, get you guys set up. Holes are a little small in the frame. I need to drill them out a little. got no problem increasing hardware size. Ah, the nuts. Probably gonna have to slot that. Need about at least 3/8 slotted out. That's all right, we can do that. Well, made some measuring mistakes. Happens sometimes. Anyway, I got my template piece made, so I'm going to use this to get my final measurements, and that's why you always buy extra material, just in case. You never know when you miss an offset and you got 15 numbers you're worrying about. You just make a template piece so you can really fine tune where you land something anyways. So that's what we got. There's a couple things I learned by making this piece. I don't like that the angle is sitting at an angle. I want it to sit flat. You see how the plate is sitting at an angle? Well, the frame is straight on top, but it has a little bit of a angle change there, right where that needs to mount. I'm happy with the center line, so my plumb bob measurements were good, but I need to basically make a spacer to go on this side to level that. The second thing I learned with this piece is I don't like how inboard the bag is. My original offset had the nuts underneath the frame. Was an accident, but I'm actually going to use that now. I'm going to go back to the offset and get that bag more underneath the frame, because I got room on the inside to the spring, and I don't want that little perch so close to the angle on the axle. Save me a little bit more work down there. So I'm going to drill the pattern so the bag is closer to center, kind of where it was, and then I'm going to build a little spacer that fits in here. I need some space anyway, so that's what I'm going to do now. Let me get the other two symmetrical brackets built so that at least they'll hang where I want them. Then I'll start making my spacer that's also a wedge. So I'm going to get to it. After fiddling around, playing with dimensions, and I got my set of angle irons that hold these airbags in place, and I'm pretty happy with their position. You can see the hole for the fitting. It's gonna have to be below the frame because they're level at the top of the frame and there's an angle, like I said earlier. I'm gonna drop it so you can get the nuts out, but it doesn't really need, you don't really need to be able to get those out, because you should just tighten those and should be all right. You can always take the full side plate off, but they look pretty good. On my reference tape. Oh no, I got my doohickey
Everything's falling. That's how they look on the outside. I just put 2 half-inch holes in it. Figured I'll just be mounting it with 2 holes out here since it's going to be touching the bottom of the frame. That's just to keep everything tidy. I still got to come up with, see, we're going to have a scissor dump in here, so reinforcing it, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do on the bottom, but I think I'm going to move on and think about it, and I'm going to make the landing plates for the bed to land on, because I know what I need to do there, so I can keep moving. I can come back to that. It's like what your high school teachers told you. When you get stuck, just move on, come back to it. It's a good attitude, really.
All right, so I had to go get some steel and some bolts, and I snuck a couple things in off camera because I was trying to figure some stuff out. I welded these little 2 plates together. They're going to be done. I always weld stuff in a stack because it saves me at least the time of reclamping a part. But this hook, it's a plate that's going to get welded in to that rear plate. It's going to take these big curl hooks. So I'm trying to get a lot of this stuff wrapped up before I get a bunch of the bed in my way. I've got a final position set up on the airbags, I think. That's kind of where I'm going to land it. I had them switch side for side on accident, so now they're lined up really good. I got a new piece of material. I didn't like what I was planning before, so I got this piece of rectangle tubing that'll sit in here. It's going to take up the clearance between the bed when it sets down, so it'll become the landing pad with lots of surface area. It's basically going to be from here clear over to here, so it's got tons of surface area. Helps reinforce that section of frame too. So I'm going to bolt it in to a couple of these holes, and then probably this set of holes, one of these 2 sets of holes right here, I'm going to bring a plate up, and it's going to have a little tang on it, so if the bed's coming down a little bit crooked, which it shouldn't, but if it's got a little flex, it'll center up perfect, so the reveal is always right. Pretty unlikely, but it's nice just to have that on the end because it's in the most, it has the most potential to have deflection clear up here at the front. So if there was a lot of weight on one side and it got a little cattywampus, we'll have a little jog that'll help guide it back to its original resting place. So I'm going to cut this guy down, drill some holes in the mill again since the vise is on. Probably I'll be able to get a nut on one of them, but the other one's going to be pretty deep in here. I might actually section the tube out a little bit so that I can get hardware through, because it's going to be pretty deep. If I'm 3 inches in there, it's going to be hard to get a bolt or nut started. So we'll see. I'll figure something out. I'm going to get it sawed up though, so I can see what it looks like on the chassis. I've been distracted too much by other people, and I've had like three visits. That's a lot for leaving the shop for chunks of time, having to go get metal and stuff. So it's the second round of mistakes today. I'll show you. Not proud of it, but I know how to work around it at least. So I'm really happy with the way this window turned out, so you can access this bolt so you can get it loose and tight. But in the process of machining, I forgot another offset. Exactly the same. Well, it's not exactly the same, but I had this hole dimensioned at 1 inch in the tube, and this one at 17 5/16. Well, I drilled this. There's a hole under here. Don't know if you've seen that, but drilled that hole at 1 inch, and that one at 17 5/16. What I forgot to do was leave my end offset of 1 inch, re-zero, or add an inch to the dimension. So I cut an inch off the end, and I'm gonna leave this bolt out of the equation, even though it's drilled, so what? And I'm gonna tie in with a plate that goes down here, and I'm gonna have to weld some stuff out here anyways, so I'm gonna utilize these holes. I'm gonna measure it, hopefully not measure it wrong and make a mistake. I'll probably do it tomorrow, because today is just getting to my head, so better to quit than, you know, make another mistake and keep making mistakes. They're not super time costly or anything, since I was gonna make this plate anyway, but it's just frustrating. So I'm gonna make a set of 4 plates that I already have the material for that. They go above, and like I said, make that little guide probably 3-4 inches higher than the top of this, and bent out a little. I can even tie into this one a little bit, and I'm gonna weld it right to this, so it's not, it's gonna be structurally absolutely sound, because we got bolts in compression and in shear. Way too good, actually. It's gonna be absolutely strong. This looks good though when you look under the bed. It's taken up a lot of the material, or open space. Only right here is going to be open, and the back is actually not going to have any. It's going to be contoured. Anyway, that's Tom hands-on mistakes of the day. You're along for the ride, so you're going to see all the good and the bad, but that's all right. It's just human nature. So I'm probably going to call it a day. Didn't get as much done as I wanted, but I've got things are starting to roll the way they should. All right, it's the next day. We're going to start on an easy project, because yesterday was kind of a mess. I mean, we got everything done pretty good. It's not that big a deal, but making mistakes is never fun, frustrating. So what we're gonna start on today is these hooks. Just got to drill through this plate, 2 different holes, about as simple as it gets. So let's get to it. These are some cool hooks.
welds on, so it's not gonna have any of this overhang. There'll be a weld joint on each side. It'll widen that up. And I got both of them done. I just gotta prep them. They're tacked in place. I'm going to fully weld this out of the rig, but those are beefy. Don't really hang too far below the hitch. I mean, the hitch is going to be out there and be what drags anyways, but you can sling a cable or chain or strap whatever right over that. Since the angle, it's not really going to lose it very easily when it gets slack, so pretty sweet old hooks out the junkyard. Gnarly always makes stuff look cooler. So I'm going to make the inner reinforcement for this, since that just being welded on one side is probably lacking in strength. So I'm going to tie this in here on the inside and box it, and I'll still be able to get to this barely through the end. Life is such. Maybe I'll weld that nut on there. I'm not sure. Alright, so we got to make a little reinforcement plate for the inside of this. I've already cut a little template. Fits in there pretty good. Definitely close enough. I mean, if there's gaps, I can just weld them shut since it's just a gusset. But it's going to weld on top of this plate and alongside this, where this angle ties in. So I'm gonna go transfer this onto a chunk, and yeah, I should be able to use the saw to cut most of that and then just come back and notch this out real quick. Shouldn't be too big a deal. Just get a length this way, miter cut in the saw, miter cut in the saw, and then make that work. I could probably drill a hole right here, since this tube is radiused, you know, kind of match that, and it'll give me a end and start, or an end for both cuts on the end there. So I'm gonna get after it.
That's like 4 inches worth of sawing. My carpal tunnel, my sciatic, from pushing at a weird angle, it's not good. There's better tools, even if they're, you know, 85 years old. I'm not too dissatisfied with that fit. Some of these gaps are just gonna get filled with welding. Like up here, that's just gonna have to be filled. I could bring it down a little, but the more you take, you gotta keep continuing to take parts off of it around the, not parts, but material all around the perimeter every time you change something on a shape like this. So I'm gonna whip this stuff out and get them tacked in so I can test fit the tank, make sure everything still goes back in with all this clearance I'm taking. All right, little overview. Just got some of this welded up. Got these guys tied in. Welded this guy. I'm gonna reuse this plate for mounting things later if I didn't already say. Put that bend on there so that the bed always comes back to center where we want it. Good thing we're repainting this because we got some burnage, but that's all right. It's getting a respray. Airbags we left off. Got these plates. Can't weld them in because the pivots from my last video, I have to get all that stuff in place so that I can get, there's a single weld right here on the bottom that I can't access if this is on. That's why it's only tacked. So I'm going to cut this guy off after I weld the pivots on, which is kind of, we're getting close to that. So that's what we got done today. I'm clocking out. I burned my head and burned my hands and probably sunburn. a little bit. Anyway, this is Tom at Tom Hands On, clocking out for the day. We'll see you tomorrow probably. Okay, so we're back in the shop, getting some more done on this dump bed. Kind of cut some parts without you, sorry. Drilling some holes because I'm mounting a winch in the back of this thing. Just tying into these three, just drilling a pattern that matches that. And that piece of angle iron is going to sit on the inside of the frame, and then I'll weld a plate to it that crosses. That will allow to be able to mount the winch here. I got it, you know, classic Harbor Freight 9500, and that will fit over the top of the tank. So I got this other piece of plate against the tires there, and I'll mount this winch to that, and then I'll bring the fair lead location is going to be on the actual dumping part of the box. So the other truck is like that. Just got to see where my clearances lie, but figured I'd get this stuff done while it's easy and available. Anywho, I'll set you up. So the frame has a pretty round corner, and this angle iron has a super square corner. So we're going to try out one of my, I got some new milling cutters I want to play with. So I'm going to knock this corner down, and we're just going to mill some clearance so we don't have any radial interference. Now I milled the top off so that they would fit in this corner. So I got those 3 bolts. It's a piece of 3/8 by 2-inch angle iron. I have a plate I'm going to weld in here that crosses, but I'm not going to do that yet because once I weld that I won't be able to get it out unless I pulled the whole thing off. So definitely got to pick your battles when building stuff like this, because I could weld it all together and then I'll have to take the whole entire back plate off to get it out. But it's never going to come out once we put it in there, so it doesn't really need to be extremely removable. It's definitely going to be more of a pain to put the fuel tank hardware and stuff in, but we'll be able to get to it. All this stuff's fitting, you know, pretty close. I might actually shift that. So this is a 10-inch cut across here. The piece of angle is 10 inches long, and my piece of plate is 10 inches long. So I might actually offset it towards the back, give me a little bit more room.
clearance issue that has to be addressed. This fuel tank fill right here. My plate for the winch mount's going to come straight across here. I have the clearance I need this way. Like the tank's low enough, and it's actually sitting a little higher because I don't have the isolators. But I got to mark the location of this hole and make a little template. I haven't decided if I want to. I might just butt weld this edge of this angle iron to that plate. So I'll cut a piece to fit, and I'll have to put this in the mill and bore that hole with a hole saw. So I've got to do that. Probably make it a little extra big so that you could get to these if you were to need to remove it. It also needs to be pretty big because the tank kind of has to tilt in shape here when you're installing it. So lots of little things in the way for things like this. Bolts are going to be, we'll have room. Just can't use too long hardware. Anyway, I'm going to mark that up. Pretty good fit. Just gonna butt weld that, but I'm not gonna do it until I'm ready to weld more. Turned out pretty good. Only reason I drilled this is so I could, when I shifted the plate, I could just kind of get close, line up on it. Even to be able to get in to my clamp on this fill hose. This is for using the tank in the back of the cab with a pump. I think I took a video on that earlier. To be able to fill this one as a transfer system. Pretty beefy, 3/8 plates, pretty good stuff. Tank will still come out. You'll be able to, it's up too high right now anyways, so we'll be able to do the fill. Let's see if the winch fits. So I've got a little bit of a conundrum. My fuel fill, I kind of got a little bit of a wild idea that we'll see. One issue I already knew was going to be a problem, kind of, not really, was the fair lead was going to be like right at the bottom edge, because if the line's coming out here, that rear plate, when I put the fair lead on, it's going to be in a, you know, kind of an ugly spot. I need to do a little bit of research, but if I run the winch backwards, just the mounting, you'll still run it, you know, the same way when pulling. I can switch from spooling on the bottom to spooling on the top, and that will bring my fair lead up, you know, the same height as the difference of the drum's diameter. So, you know, 4 inches probably or something. I don't know what kind of leverage that's going to put on things, but putting it this way, I can modify the fill. I believe I can just take this and basically bring a piece of steel tubing out, you know, just make this actually come through that area. So I'm kind of a little strange idea. I can also move, you know, I can move the winch backwards. I'll have to open the hole up. Did not really anticipate that, but I guess I just didn't measure to see how big the winch was. I thought it was smaller, but it's kind of a tank. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's an issue with pulling the wire over the top, other than it creates more leverage against these plates. But these are pretty strong plates. Something to think about for sure. Well, I will catch you on the next video. Made in the USA.